The joys of winter riding. For a lot of us, it can be make or break as to whether or not we get out on our bikes. Luckily, I flippin' love it, so I've got some top tips to try and help you enjoy and embrace that winter riding and make those rides even more fun. Let's start at the beginning then. Before we even get to the trails, why should you, or would you even want to go out in those horrible conditions? Well then, riding in the slippy, sloppy, horrible conditions can be hugely beneficial to your actual riding to begin with, but on top of that, it's going to give you a newfound love and appreciation to riding in those summer months. On top of that, it can sharpen up your skills. If you can ride slippy route sections covered in mud, you can ride any route, anytime. Improve your maintenance skills. It's no secret that the winter takes its toll on your bike. So if you can keep it running through that, you're onto a winner. More riding time, of course. Yep, you'll open up more riding time once you embrace those winter months. I'm sure after that, I've convinced you winter riding is amazing. But how can we make it more bearable? Well, first up, clothing. Having the right equipment for the job is absolutely key. So let's kick things off with clothing. Now, the old adage, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing, has never been truer. So as it gets a little bit colder and a little bit gloomier here in the UK, what kind of layers could we be putting on to make our riding more comfortable? Let's start at the bottom because layering is crucial when it comes to the cold weather. At the bottom, I'll always end up wearing a base layer. Something quite snug fitting, quite tight, made of a technical material so it'll wick the sweat away because you don't want to be all damp and cold at the kind of core of yourself. Next up, a long sleeve top. Again, a technical one, much like this lovely GMBN one here. Again, it's made from a technical material which is going to help wick the sweat away and keep you nice and warm and as dry as possible. Fairly loose fitting so you're able to move around nice and easily on the bike. I don't go for anything too tight, layer upon layer, because with the base layer as well, it can be a little bit restrictive. If I find I'm still a bit chilly after that, well then, on guard. A gilet will go on top of that. That's really going to help keep my core warm because if your core temperature does start to drop, it's very hard to get back from that and that's when you'll really start to notice it. So a good gilet there is also going to be windproof to keep that chill out as well. The final layer when it comes to the top half is what I think is the most crucial, and it's a coat. Now, there's obviously lots of different types of coats out there, from warmer insulated style ones to thinner, fully waterproof, breathable ones. Generally, when it comes to riding, I'll go for the latter. If it's really cold and dry, then you might want a sort of a warmer insulated style coat, but normally it's cold and it's very wet, so these things can absorb the water a little bit. So something like this is what I'd go for. Nice waterproof coat. It's got a waterproof rating of 15,000 millimeters, which we'll get onto in a moment. But it's a mountain bike specific coat. It's longer at the back, so it kind of protects you from spray. The hood's quite large on it, so you can put it up over your helmet. It helps keep the splashes and the wind and the cold out. It's got a waterproof zip on it. It's kind of got all the gizmos you'd expect for this. But what about that waterproof rating? What does it actually mean? The level of waterproofness is tested using a hydrostatic head test. The fabric is pulled tight under a 1-inch diameter sealed tube of water. This is then observed over 24 hours to ascertain how many millimeters of water the fabric can withstand before it soaks through. The level at which water starts to come through the fabric is the hydrostatic head, which is measured in millimeters. Now, what about when it comes to the bottom half? What do you do there when it gets cold? Well, as standard, I would always wear a good pair of chamois bibs, if you like. Something padded, nice and comfy, does keep you a little bit warm. But when it gets really cold, you might want to upgrade to bib tight. It's a longer version. They're going to cover your entire leg. A line set is going to be nice and warm there. It comes up generally a little bit higher as well, so it helps keep that core warm like we've been talking about. And my bonus little pro tip for you, put your base layer on first, then your bibs, and put the bib, sort of the actual straps, over the base layer. What that does is help hold that base layer nice and down and in place and tight. Sometimes if you put it on over the top, you'll often notice the base layer kind of rides up and can get a little bit uncomfortable or not really stay in place and do what it's supposed to do. When it comes to trousers, there's a couple of different options. You've got the full waterproof option, which if you are riding in the most harsh conditions, these can be great, but bear in mind, they can be a little warmer, a little bit bulkier, and maybe not quite as form-fitting, shall we say, but they do a great job of keeping the elements at bay. For myself, I actually like to take a bit of hit on the weather on the lower half sometimes, but still have something that's going to give me a bit of protection, much like the GMBN riding pants, which have a water-repellent coating. They're going to be great for a lot of the ride, but obviously if I got in absolutely torrential conditions, I would maybe switch over to a full waterproof trouser. Bonus clothes to make winter riding even more fun now. And we'll start at the bottom. Waterproof socks. Great for keeping the elements out and your tootsies toasty. If you want to go even further, a winter-specific riding shoe like these Shimano MW7s, Gore-Tex, waterproof. These things are the creme de la creme of keeping you going in those winter months. Moving up, a buff. Yep, we're heading right up to the top half this time. Just a buff over the head. If you're aerodynamic like myself, they can keep your head warm, or just around your neck can help keep the wind out as well. Glasses, always great for keeping the crud out your eye and obviously being able to see where to go. And I've heard that when it does get cold, people wear gloves in the winter if they get cold hands. I must try that one out sometime. We've made it out into the woods on this glorious day. Well, anyway, we've made it nonetheless. And it's time to talk about bike setup. What can we do to our bikes to make it handle the weather and deal with the conditions a little bit better? Well, here's a few things. Let's talk tyres. Now, you can see on my bike here, I'm kind of running an intermediate tyre, the Vittoria Mazza, great in any conditions. But when the conditions get really sloppy, really muddy, you might want to think about switching to a more winter or mud-specific tyre. It's going to have a much more aggressive and open tread pattern. This aggressive and open tread pattern actually plays beneficial in a couple of ways. So first up, the much more spread out knobs. That makes me laugh. The wider spaced tread is going to allow mud to clear from it a lot better. A tighter treaded pattern means that mud builds up in between all the little knobbles, packs in there, and you might have seen this where your tyre just looks like an oval of mud. It's not shedding that mud very well, so that kind of mud-specific tyre will do that. Also, generally, the wider spaced knobs as well and the taller, more pronounced ones are going to bite into the dirt and the ground a lot better, giving you better grip. Whilst we're still talking about tyres, let's touch in on pressure, because I always think you can drop the pressures a little bit in winter. Generally, the speeds are a bit slower, so the chances of punctures are slightly more limited. But on top of that, reducing the pressure is actually going to give you more grip. So a softer tyre is going to conform and mould to the ground, the rocks, the roots, and all the slippy little obstacles that you might be going over a little bit better, improving grip in that way. But actually, it's going to give you a slightly larger contact patch as well. That softer tyre is going to squidge down, if you like, press down into the ground, especially when there's weight going through it, spread out onto the ground, give you a larger contact patch, as I said, and in that way give you a bit more grip as well. An absolute bike winter must has got to be a mudguard. Now, there's lots of different types of mudguards out there. All of them are going to be better than absolutely nothing at all, but you can get things from these kind of tiny little fenders that you'll see, little bits of plastic just coming off the back of the fork. They're all the way through to these more moto-style looking bolt-on MTB specific or fork specific ones as well. This one here is an RRP Pro Guard. It bolts directly to the back of the fork. You can see it wraps around, and they actually make bigger versions of these which wrap around even further. And that's going to be great for keeping all the crap off of my clothing, out of my eyes. Going to help keep my vision really good as well as sort of protecting my forks, protecting my bike and the frame a little bit. And if you want to take that the full way, if you're a rear mudguard kind of person, you can get similar things that will go out the back of the bike to help stop mud from flicking up and maybe help protect the linkage in the bike as well. I'd say a mudguard is right up there as being an absolute must. Flat pedals in the winter equal more smiles. I'm almost sure of it. Putting a set of flat pedals on, if you're a devout clipped rider, stick a set of flats on for the winter and I guarantee you're going to have a little bit more fun. Or if you're new to mountain biking, they're going to eradicate loads of worries you might have about falling over. Look, if you've got flats on, you can get all drifty, you can slide around turns, you can dab a foot. You haven't got that sort of fear or worry of maybe toppling over, sliding out, being still attached to the bike or crashing in any kind of weird, twisty, unfortunate way. I do genuinely just think that flat pedals are more fun. You will inevitably get some wild, slidey moments when you're riding wild, slidey tracks. So why not have the pedal to match? Let's leave that one back there a moment. Now, if you've got a few quid knocking around, if you're lucky enough and you're a fan of the N+1 rule, then a winter hardtail hack bike has got to be next on the list. Easy to maintain, cheap to run, loads of fun. Just don't tell the other half you've got another bike. It's time to go riding now. What can we do to our riding styles to help us clean a section when it gets slippery and muddy? Well, there's a few things we can do. Take this kind of rooty, very slippery example in the trail. When it comes to something like this, if it was dry, you'd think nothing of it. You'd hammer straight through, easy peasy. In the wet, we want to try and stay a little bit looser on our bike. Riding all tensed up's never going to be the way to go. Allowing the bike to be light underneath us and dance around and move about a little bit. I'm not sort of saying left, right, here, there and everywhere, but just sort of stay loose on it so it can skip about when it hits little slips and slides is going to give us a much greater chance of success on certain sections of trail. Like you just saw, when the bike does start to slide, don't fight it. Embrace the slide. That's all part of that kind of linking through to what I just said about keeping the bike nice and loose underneath you and linking through to previously about having flat pedals on. When that bike starts to slide, if you can get a foot out nice and easily to sort of control or counteract that, it can actually help you get around obstacles and turns by allowing that back end to drift, much like a rally car does, like a little Scandi flick or something. Embracing the slide can really be part of winter riding. It's time for all things braking now because, yes, you can alter your braking ever so slightly to hopefully limit washing out or tucking the front end or anything sort of horrible like that that might occur when riding, especially sort of wet turns. Wet turns are often where we see a bit of an issue when it comes to braking. So in the winter, I'm generally a lot lighter on the front brake. I'll use the rear to steer, if you like, locking the back wheel up, like I said, getting a bit of a drift on. You've got to be really careful with your modulation, how grabby you are on the front brake. If you grab it too hard and lock up that front wheel, it'll often wash out really easily from underneath you. It shifts your body weight where you don't need it. Stack a load of weight over the front. If you ever had it, you grab it, boom, front end's gone before you can even count to 3, shall we say. So I'll be a lot more gentle on it. That being said, obviously, if you do need to slow down quickly, the front brake is the one to do that. Ideally, then, you want to try and shift so all your braking is done in a straight line and never on a turn. Let's talk body position now. And I've got two that I sort of switch between, if you like. If I'm riding something quite long and fast and rutty, I'm going to be standing up on the bike, but actually I'm going to have my weight shifted slightly back. That's going to unweight the front end ever so slightly. And this is more in straight lines and scenarios like that. And I think it comes from riding motocross a lot as well. Unweighting the front lets it sort of dance and skip around. So if it sort of catches side to side, it sort of naturally finds its straight line and finds its way through a section. However, if the same sort of gradient, if we're talking about if it gets a little steeper but rougher, rockier, rootier, slipperier, things like that, I'm actually going to bring my chest slightly ever so forwards so it's kind of over the bars. Arse is kind of over the saddle. Strong in the arms, head up, looking forwards, pedals level, heels dropped. But what this is doing is this is putting me in the middle of the bike and it's allowing me to move around the bike whenever the scenario may consist of it. So I might be able to go forwards, backwards, left or right. And that sort of centralization of my body weight allows the bike to move around underneath me as well. And if it does slip and slide, I've got plenty of room for maneuver. This next one isn't necessarily about how you ride, but more where you ride. Now, if like me, the winter conditions turn your local into an absolute slop fest and end up resembling something like this, well, then what we end up doing is trying to hunt out bike parks and trail centres where the tracks and the design of them are much more enduring to those horrible conditions. Trails can be graded or surfaced in certain ways to allow water runoff so that they're not just pooling and getting really churned up. This allows us to ride all year round with kind of minimal consequence, if you like. So that's all the riding done. What do you do when you've got to tackle the aftermath, the cleaning? Number 1, pre-wash. Give the bike a rinse over to get the bulk of the mud off the bike. We don't want to be scrubbing it with grit. Number 2, cleaner. With a lot of the looser mud removed, apply the cleaner to loosen up the stubborn stuff. Number 3, scrub. Give your beloved a good scrub all over, making sure you get in all the nooks and crannies. Here I also like to have a dedicated brush for the drivetrain so I don't contaminate anything else. Number 4, wash. Time for a rinse off. A hose is fine. I often use a power washer. I just make sure I don't get too close to not cause any damage to bearings or other moving parts. Number 5, dry. Once spotless, using a microfiber cloth, give things a good wipe and dry down. This gives you a good opportunity to check your bike over. A separate cloth for the drivetrain is also a great idea here as well. Number 6, and the final step, lube and aftercare. Once clean and dry, a drop of wet lube on the chain, wiping away any excess, and some silicone spray on the frame help keep the mud at bay. If using aerosol-based penetrating or lubricating sprays, apply it on a rag first, away from the bike, then wipe on. And there we have it, a beautiful looking bike at the end of a delightful day's riding. Look, hopefully these tips and tricks have, should we say, enlightened your thoughts of what you think winter riding could be. Maybe you'll enjoy it a little bit next time, these tips and tricks. If I've missed any, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know what you think. Happy riding in the winter, everyone. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do, and I'll see you next time. Oof, isn't she shiny?